Awesome. I like, speaking of Lee and wisdom, I like Lee on the line from Canada. So I would love to hear what Lee has to say. It looks like he's got a question for you, Christy, and I'm super excited about this because, it reflects what we talked about in the beginning.
Sure. Yeah. So Lee, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Christy and Jimmy.
Hey.
And Jimmy, please feel free to to cut in or say something too. But I used to be a very active person in the Catholic Church back in most of my life. Active in the parish, was even in the seminary for a while, that sort of thing. But now I'm a very active atheist, and it's weird when the things going around the Pope and the conclave and all that. That would all have been very important things for my friends and I talking about all the time. Now, I have some interest, but I still there's like I feel not completely comfortable. Like I can listen a little bit, but I don't want to hear too much about it. I think about it a little bit. I can't help myself, but there's just some sort of discomfort there that I can't really put a finger on, and maybe you can talk to that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say as a therapist, like a bizarre amount of my week is taken up talking to people about, okay, how do we take in the news? How much news do we need to be taking in? Is there value in reading every headline or in doom scrolling through TikTok for hour after hour as you learn about the, descent into madness? And I want to say that it is important that we be informed, but that we be pretty mindful about the way we take it in, because a lot of these things are going to be triggering. And when we talk about the coverage of the papal conclave and of the, sitting in state and Pope Francis's death and all of these kinds of things, it's going to stir up a lot of big feelings for a lot of people. And I hope that you would be tender with yourself and not feel like there's something wrong with you or that you are obligated to push through it or memorize every, news factoid right now.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not feeling like I really need to do all of that. It just seems it's hard to even look at YouTube or have a TV on or radio or whatever, and they're talking about it. And like I say, I've got some part of me is fascinated, another part of me doesn't want to hear anything about it. Kind of, in some ways, it kind of repulses me to some extent. And it's just a weird, I don't know, is it some dissonance going on, I think.
Yeah. And we might anticipate that from a trauma response. I have tried really hard when doing these shows to emphasize what I think is an important point, which is that trauma is not this horrible, awful, terrible thing that happened to you. It certainly can be, but trauma is not the event or the thing that caused pain. It's the pain itself. It's not the fall that kills you, it's the landing. So there's no need, I think, to say, well, this doesn't raise to the level of being traumatic, or my trauma, my pain is insignificant. I recognize there's a total difference between having a small cut on the heel of your foot and shattering your ankle. So we can sort of put these things on a spectrum, but we also don't need to deny that having a rock in your shoe or having a bruise on your heel is still painful and is still matters. So Lee, I don't want to diminish your pain in the least bit, but rather validate it and say that we so often get into this place of, well, it's fine. It doesn't hurt that badly. And if that's the case, great, good for you. But we also don't need to dismiss the pain that is here. And as we see these news stories that sort of stir up some of that pain, it may be an indication that there is old trauma that hasn't fully healed or hasn't healed well. And perhaps a lot of that will pass as more time goes on, as some of these stories drop out of the news. Perhaps they're worth addressing a little bit more headlong, whether that's through a good book about religious trauma or with the help of a supportive therapist or, other people in your community.
Thanks, Christy. I'm curious if Jimmy's got anything to say.
Sure, I do. Well, I don't know that I can have quite the expertise, but I do want to speak from my own personal experience and just say that I think that I'll put myself in my religious shoes, as a former Lutheran, right? I grew up believing certain things as part of a community and as part of a congregation where I could look around and see familiar faces. And I knew that they were concerned about me. They cared about me. They considered us part of the same tribe. And even though I eventually moved on and I kind of denounced Christianity and took an outward approach against it, a step against some of the things that it is, I would say, compliant in. And I would still feel maybe a sense of loss if something, let's say, were to happen to one of those people, or if somebody burned down the church that I grew up going to. I feel a connection, a piece of history, a piece of myself in some of those people and in that building. And it's part of my story, and to see negative things happen to people and places and experience that I consider all part of the building blocks that make me who I am, I think it's okay to feel a little bit of hurt and disappointment. Maybe that might be something that you're experiencing. You probably gave a lot of your life to Catholicism and were trained for a long time to look up to the man at the front of the congregation, the guy with the book in the cloth, not only in your own local congregation, but that of the global congregation in the Pope. And it could still sting, when you feel a loss or some kind of negative impact toward those people or that body. I think it's perfectly understandable. And I don't think that, you have anything to necessarily be ashamed about. I would liken it to maybe also like, I don't know, an ex-girlfriend or an old relationship. They're no longer a part of your life, but you don't want to see something bad happen to them, right? And so maybe there's just a little bit of that story that's a part of you that's being affected that feels so uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, being part of some sort of a community that's bigger than myself has always been a big thing for me. And I do miss that. That was a big motivation for me to reach out to various atheist communities, both close to me and even the ACA. But all, and actually, it's not just a Roman Catholic Church, and I don't want to, I don't need you, I don't want to blindside you with anything, Jimmy, but I've had kind of a traumatic experience with my with some years in the U.S. Army too, and and I get a kind of a dissonance. There's a big part of me that doesn't want anything to do with anything military, and another one that kind of misses some of the camaraderie I had, and that sort of thing. And it's just. I guess I got lots of issues. I gotta it'll take time to work through.
We all need help with something. You're not alone there.
Yeah, that's the nature of life. The bruises and scrapes that you take along the way. It's not to suggest that they all make you stronger, but also that you're just a person experiencing person things. This is not a sign that you are broken or weak, just that this is what comes of, wisdom. This is what comes of trying to make it through this life.
Thanks, guys, for your help.
Yeah, appreciate you so much. You have a good day.